Hey North Coast, we're so glad you're with us today. My name is Tanner and I serve on the video team. If you're looking for sermon notes or more information, you can visit us online at northcoastchurch.com. We're continuing our series in Mark, the Untold story of Jesus, so grab your Bibles as we jump into the Word of God. Hope you enjoy.
The chair from the table has been pulled away and now faces the entirety of the small house. It's where he has sat for days, although in the hopelessness and helplessness, it seems like he's been sitting there for months. He's close enough to see everything that's happening around her bed, but far enough away to feel absolutely useless. As a dad, he's always said his job was to provide, protect, and to care for the family. He can't do all three. He can't do any of them right now. He's watched his neighbors come over with their best remedies and advice, and he's watched as his only daughter, 12 years old, her frame now is drifting away. She can't lose any more weight. She hasn't eaten in days. And the conversation from 2 nights before still plagues his mind. He knows what his wife has begged him to do. He knows what his daughter needs. And now he realizes it's the only option left in this little house. So he will finally leave the chair and walk over to the bedside. He will reach down and remove the damp washcloth that covers her forehead and stoop over and give her a kiss on the cheek. And in this proximity, he feels her fever radiating up against his flesh. It's another sign that time is short, how dire this is. He tries to muster up his best acting, a smile on his face. Daddy needs to go for a little bit. I'll be back soon, and I'm going to bring help. At this point, they don't know how much she can listen or hear, how cognitive she is. She seems to be in and out of consciousness. And with that, he puts his hand on his wife's shoulder. She hasn't left the bed for days. That has been her post. And he will kiss her on the top of the head. And he will turn, and as quietly as he can, he'll open the door, slip out into the daylight, and quietly shut it. His wife's surprised. It's what she begged him 2 nights ago. But she knows what it would cost him, and so does he. As his pace picks up outside, as he walks now with an agenda, he knows he may lose his job, he may lose his standing in the community, but what he can't lose is his only little girl, so he walks with a purpose. And little does he know that across town, in a completely different neighborhood, another door has been opened and shut silently. And someone else has stepped out on a pace with the exact same agenda. And their 2 paths are about to collide in a moment that will change history for both families. In a moment that 2,000 years later, you and I may just find our Easter. It's a story so good. I want you to watch the rest of this on your own flat screen. So if you got a Bible, turn to Mark chapter 5, verse 21. If you're just hanging out with us on Easter because grandma asked you to show up at Easter or mom begged you to come and you got a Bible because you thought you needed one, turn to the back, flip it around, look for the guys' names, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Mark chapter 5, verse 21. If you got a smartphone, just touch the Bible app, Mark 5. We're in. Mark 5, 21, the ongoing story of 5 chapters so far that Christopher Hilkin and Larry and I have been doing sentence by sentence, verse by verse. Verse 21. Now, when Jesus had again crossed over by boat to the other side of the lake, a large crowd gathered around him while he was by the lake. If it seems like you've just jumped in the middle of a story, you have. It's a story of where this boat has taken Jesus and the 12 that have traveled with them. It's a 3-part story. And Mark has been writing to us the eyewitness accounts. This is what this day and a half or 2 days was like in the story of Jesus. And if you weren't here 2 weeks ago, we picked up the story. Christopher Hilkin told us about Jesus on this side of the lake, telling his disciples, we are going to cross over. Let's go over to the other side And as Jesus and the disciples got in the boat, about midway through, a furious squall broke down from the north. And as the winds broke across the sea, an epic storm broke out, where seasoned fishermen, men who make their living on the lake, because their father made their living on this lake, because great-grandpappy made their living on this lake, fear for their lives. And they wake up a sleeping Jesus and said, "Don't you care that we're about to drown?" And Jesus stands up and looks at the raging storm. 2 words, "Be still." And wind and waves and thunder and lightning and clouds obey, and a silence immediately falls on the lake. And then he turns and he looks at the shocked 12. "So where's your faith? I told you we were going to the other side. And in the midst of your faith, you come across great fear and you abandoned faith." As the boat reaches the other shore, we picked up last week, as they cross now the Sea of Galilee and come to an area not occupied by the Jewish people, a man comes running down from the tombs where he lives, naked and bleeding. He's been cutting himself with sharp stones. He falls on the gravel in front of Jesus on the shoreline, and he screams out and begs not to be tortured. And Jesus, undaunted, unmitigated, unchallenged, simply says, "What is your name?" And somewhere from within the man, the voice comes, "My name is Legion, because we are many." And chills go up our spine. Legion, it's the name given to a unit, a Roman army that musters over 6,000 men. Oh, there's not one that inhabits this man. There are many. Without flexing, without taking off his cloak, without being challenged, mere words, he cast the demons out of the man. I've caught you up on the little boat story so far. They're free online if you want to go and listen or watch them on your own. For the purpose of this story, I want you to take out your note sheet. We're going to fill in 2 blanks right now, and then put your pen and pencil down, because we're going to jump into the story. So far, though, in the last 2 weeks, Mark has been claiming that this man, Jesus, has the power over epic storms. He gives us a detailed story about one day in the life of the disciples in the midst of the lake, and he wants us to know, hey, this man, this myth, this Messiah, is he Lord? Is he a liar? Is this just a legend? Those eyewitnesses, those in the boat say, here's what he does. He has the power over epic storms. When they cross the other side, Mark wants us to write down, secondly, this man Jesus has the power over legions of demons. Legions of demons. He has the power over the natural, and he has all power over the supernatural. This is concluding 4 chapters of healing the blind, healing the paralyzed, healing those with leprosy. He goes, let me tell you the full extent. Mark is pleading with us, trying to give us eyewitness accounts. The kingdom of God is unveiled on earth because God himself is walking on earth. Now, I don't know what you do with those stories. I don't know how much stock you put in the truth of those stories. What we've been doing here since January is going verse by verse through these stories. We've been taking everything they've given us and every place that he's been and every action and putting it on the board. We're trying to figure out what happened inside these city walls of Jerusalem that 2,000 years later, this man Jesus, his face is still on the cover of the most popular magazines today. What happened 2,000 years ago that this man Jesus makes us put on extra services? Thanks for coming. Because a crowd will show up on Easter. How much stock do you put in the stories that radically define our own calendar today? You may celebrate it by passing presents and decorating a tree, but Christmas will once again come because something happened in an obscure manger on the outskirts of a podunk village. Your kids may have got up this morning and tried to find baskets and bite the ears or the bottom off of a bunny. That tells you a lot about the character of your kids. But we cannot get off the calendar if there's a tomb that's empty. Every time I tap my phone, it screams 2019. 2019. To someone that split the fabric of time, that all things before these stories are BC, before Christ, all things afterwards, 2019 AD, Anno Domini, the year of our Lord. And Mark is trying to write, this was no man. He has power over the natural, power over the supernatural. And when they cross the sea, once again, a crowd shows up. May I remind you, Easter crowd, you are in the story. It always mentions the crowd, but the story is never about the crowd. The story is about those who dare step outside the crowd. Congratulations, you've showed up. You've made part of the story. This one's about to get good. Verse 22. Now one of the synagogue rulers named Jairus came there, and seeing Jesus, he fell at his feet, and he pleaded earnestly with him, "It's my little daughter. She's dying. Can you please come and put your hands on her so that she will be healed and live?" So Jesus went with him, and a large crowd, there you are, followed and pressed around him. And a woman was there who had been subject to bleeding for 12 years. She had suffered a great deal under the care of many doctors and had spent all that she had. Yet instead of getting better, she grew worse. And when she heard about Jesus, she came up behind him in the crowd and she touched his cloak because she thought, if I just touch his clothes, I can be healed. Now immediately, her bleeding stopped. She felt in her body that she was freed from her suffering. And at once, Jesus realized that power had gone out from him. And he turned around the crowd and he asked, "Who touched my clothes?" "You see the people crowding against you?" His disciples answered. "And yet you can ask, 'Who touched me?'" But Jesus kept looking around to see who had done it. And two stories from two different homes collide in the midst of this crowd that shows up for Easter. He has put everything on the line. In the first 4 chapters, Mark has written very clearly, there is one major group that opposes this Jesus so far. It's the religious leaders. They hate that the crowds aren't coming to church. The crowds are going to him because he's speaking truth. He's speaking change. Oh, he demands a lot of people, but what he is giving in return, well, you could never come up with on your own. He claims to be God. He claims to forgive sins. What does a religious system do with a crazy man like that? And this story brings the two together. He is a synagogue leader. He is the church leader in that community, if you will. And he knows by going to Jesus for help, he may lose his standing, his position, his job, but he cannot lose his little girl. And he begs, "This isn't about me. It's about her." And there's a static electricity that follows the crowd. This is what we came for. We're going to see a Jesus story. It's 4 blocks up Main Street. It's a left on Fruit Street. It's a right on 3rd, 2 houses on the left. Everyone knows in a small town like this where Jairus would live. And as the crowd starts hurrying down the street, a second lens of Scripture picks up her. She too has just heard the demand. She's close enough to hear what is happening. She's staying at a distance, and we're about to know why. In one sentence, the Bible begs us to go there. She has had a constant flow of blood hemorrhaging for 12 years. She has spent every penny she has at the hands of many doctors. Yet instead of getting better, she has grown even worse. And at this point, you're thinking to yourself, this is not an Easter message. Please tell me we're not going there. A great pastor would have looked at where we left off and said, let's take a break, let's do a great Easter message and come back to the teaching. Well, you don't have that type of pastor. You have a fairly decent one instead, who just sticks to the script. She has had a menstrual cycle for 12 years. And can you imagine the horror she has subjected herself to in first century medicine, in such a private place? And no wonder the bleeding has gotten worse. Mark assumes when he's writing, we understand culture and context. He assumes we understand that when Jesus crossed this little lake and came back to the other side, we are now squarely in Jewish territory. These are Hebrew people. They are governed by the laws of their Old Testament, especially the first 5 books of Moses. And Leviticus 15 has an entire chapter on issues of blood. What does it mean if you cut yourself, if you're bleeding, if someone else is bleeding, if blood in any way touches anything? And there's an entire chapter of their law that says you are deemed unclean. When the bleeding stops, you are unclean for 24 hours. Anything you touch is unclean. Anyone who touches anything you touch, they will be unclean. You can't go out in public and bump into anyone. If anyone gets close proximity to you, you have to, with your voice, it's your responsibility to announce you're unclean so they can move and part ways around you. At a time of being unclean, you are not allowed into any religious services, activities, or duties. Your entire celebratory calendar revolves around the religious system. And Mark is begging us to go there. For 12 years, this woman has been untouchable, unhuggable, unlovable, uninvited, unaccepted. For 12 years, anything she touches is unclean. For 12 years, if she dare go out in public and near a crowd, she with her own voice has to tell people inadvertently walking her way, unclean. She has to deal with the stares. She has hustled down the alleyway. She has crossed Fruit Street, and she's on the corner of 3rd. The road narrows. The crowd must get smaller. And in this moment, she waits and she sees her opportunity. And as they pass by, she reaches out and she touches his cloak. And the moment she touches him, immediately she knew within her body she was free. She turns to go. She is in awe. She is ecstatic. And then her greatest nightmare happens. Who just touched me? And she's frozen in her steps. The disciples realize how ludicrous of a question this is. They don't say which one answered, but I got $100 on Peter. That dude answers when he's not supposed to answer. When he's supposed to answer, he usually answers wrong. This guy's my hero. 1, 2, 3, 4, 9 people touching you right now. Hey, crowd, hey, listen up. Since we left the boat, how many of you touched Jesus? Handshake, pat him on the shoulder. What did it? About $1.50. Over 100 people. Jesus completely ignores the argument. Who just touched me? And the crowd realizes something seriously has gone wrong. For your synagogue ruler to be hurrying through the crowd, she's 12 years old. When I left, we didn't have much time. For Jesus to pull the e-brake on that parade and turn around and demand, every set of eyes are on him, except for one pair. She has turned to leave. And as she turns, I bet he's staring right at her. The Bible says as she moves, she's overcome with her fear. She can't support her own weight anymore. She falls in the dirt. And it simply says in verse 33, then the woman, knowing what had happened to her, came and fell at his feet, trembling with fear, told him the whole truth. Circle, highlight, underline. In heaving sobs, it all comes out. It all comes out. Can you imagine the gasp in the crowd? Can you imagine the family and community that's there in the crowd? Which way did she come from? Did she bump into us? Did she touch you? My kids are here. Did you touch one of my kids? She took what she did not ask for. She grabbed what was not hers. She has stolen from Christ himself. And she braces herself for what is about to come. And he puts the full power of heaven against her. And Jesus said to her, daughter, out of all the words she was expecting to hear in that moment, out of everything the crowd was calling her, that was not one of them. But if he could sum up in one word everything she needed in that moment, he nailed it with the full power of heaven, not against her, but for her, daughter. I didn't understand the definition of that word until 17 years ago. And then again 16 years ago. I'm a West Texas, hard-hearted, thick-headed guy who grew up with a bunch of idiot brothers. I knew my job here on earth was to procreate idiot boys. My rearview mirror shows me I have never had a good relationship with any female. There was something to be taken from. I had nothing to give. And when God got a hold of my life, I knew he would bless me with sons, not curse me with daughters. And to my shock, my wife gave me daughter. She claims I had more to do with that than her. I claim she touched him last. And I sat there for months holding something, burrito swallowed up in a little pink blanket, wondering what in the world you do with daughter. It wasn't till months 13, 14, 15, 16, somewhere in there, when I would come home from work. And at that point, the oldest one had realized she could not work the latch on the screen door, but if she banged against the steel frame hard enough, by the fourth or fifth time, it would give way. And she would let herself out of the house when my car came up the driveway. And this little spring dress with flowers on it, with flip-flops with flowers between the first and second toe that matched the dress, with a little ribbon in her hair, I found out about accessorizing, would come tearing at me at a speed that every step you swear she was about to fall. And when she got close to me, she never slowed down, she sped up. You have a choice to make as father. You let her run into your knees and hit hard, or in a bullfighting type move, you step to the side and you grab her momentum and you pick her up in the air higher than she thought she would go. And the squeals stop as she momentarily loses her breath. And once again, God in his great wisdom knew this West Texas hard-hearted, thick-headed guy needed the only thing that would soften his heart was daughter, times 2. Do you see what he did? He took all the power of heaven that ceases storms, that casts out demons, that heals the leprosy, the lame, the sick, the paralyzed, the blind. And he said, with that title, with that power, I call you daughter. This is the only place in the entire Bible Jesus calls someone daughter. And it's reserved for her, the 12 years, unlovable, unhuggable, rejected, uninvitable, unacceptable. And after hearing the entire truth, he lets the crowd know, this one's mine. If you have a problem with her, you're going to have a problem with me. See, that's also what daughter means. In this aging, chubby frame of mine, I don't know what I have left in me, but I promise you, if you go after daughter, you will find out what I got in my tank and what is still loaded in my closet. There's still a lot of West Texas and Southern California, boy. You mess with her, you've messed with me. And she's free from crazy, stupid laws in the Bible that she's been trapped in the backwash of for 12 years. Crazy, stupid laws about you're unclean if you're bleeding. It's ridiculous. When Moses wrote that law, it would be 3,200 years until in 1860, not that long ago, a man named Louis Pasteur would develop a whole new science of microbiology. Oh, we all knew there's macrobiology. There's big living things amongst us. In 1860 was the first time we understood something called germs, bacteria. There's microorganisms. And those of you that are first responders today, thank you for the service you play. On behalf of us and our community, you know this story better than us. I don't care how tragic the scene. I don't care how young the victim. We know one of the most dangerous fluids on earth today is blood. You will glove up and sometimes mask up before you deal with that fluid. 3,200 years before science would come up with it, God said this is going to be ridiculous law. Trust on God. It won't make sense for thousands of years. And people today, I read this book and I read the New Testament and I see the words and teachings of Jesus and I go, God, this is just antiquated. Why do I have to deny myself my sexuality? Why do I have to deny myself my urges and desires? Why do I have to deny myself my finances? What do you mean I manage your stuff? On the 15th and 30th, your name's not on that check, buddy. I've worked for it. Why do I have to forgive those who don't deserve it and haven't asked for it? Why do I have to love my spouse if she hasn't treated me right? Why do I have to be generous to others? Why do I have to control my anger and my tongue? There's times where good anger and good tongue can get the job done quickly. And there's page after page of challenges for me to go, so are you in charge of your life or him? Because there's plenty of times God has written stuff that was ridiculous until 3,000 years later, and I've got to come and say, God, are you really in charge of this or not? Oh, when she touched him, she was freed physically. But emotionally, socially, relationally, sexually, spiritually, she's still off limits. Those around her know her story. How was she going to tell them that she reached out and she made Jesus unclean? What is she going to tell them? That she took was not hers? She will live free physically, but she will live in guilt and shame from this day, wondering what God's going to do to her when he finally catches up to her. So Jesus calls her out of compassion. It's going to be hard for you, but I want the entire truth. I want others to hear the entire truth. And at the end of your entire truth, I want everyone to know you're mine. You're mine. From this moment on, there is no guilt. There is no shame. Oh, daughter, you did not touch me and make me unclean. You touched me and I made you clean. It's done. And you will never have guilt and shame because it is all known. This is the way Jesus operates all throughout Scripture. A woman at the well that he has a conversation with, and she, in the beginning of the book of John, and she goes, I want to be saved. He goes, well, let's talk to your husband. Well, I'm not married. Oh, that's right. You've been married 5 times. The guy you're currently sleeping with is someone else's husband. Oh, you're good. Couldn't I have just come to church and been saved? He said, no. I don't want you spiritually, okay? I want you emotionally, relationally, sexually, physically, okay? I want all of you. The night of his betrayal and death, as Jesus is taken with Roman guard, as they're flaying his back open with whips, as they're pummeling in the face, as they shove a crown of thorns on his head, one of his disciples, Peter, comes back. He's in the fire outside the trial, close enough to know what's going on, and people in the flame light recognize him. You're one of the followers, aren't you? No way. 3 times he denies that he knows Jesus. The last time he starts cursing that he has nothing to do with this Jesus fellow. Yeah, you're not going to get over that, my friend. Every time you come to church and try to be spiritual, this little voice goes, can I remind you who you are? Yep. So the first conversation Jesus has once he pulls off Easter and rises from the dead is with who? Peter. And on the seaside, he goes, Peter, do you love me? Do you love me? Do you love me? I know what you did. I know what you did. I know what you did. I want the whole truth. I want you to know that I know. And from this moment on, the name that you're going to be called is Son. It's done, buddy. It's done. Oh, she was freed physically. But he wanted all of her in that moment. Daughter, he simply says, it is your faith that has healed you. Go in peace and be freed from your suffering. It wasn't my cloak. Wow. Oh my gosh, I forgot about the little girl. Ignoring what they said. Oh, while Jesus was still speaking, some men from the house of Jairus, the synagogue ruler, came. Your daughter is dead, they said. You don't need to bother the teacher anymore. And ignoring what they said, Jesus told the synagogue ruler, don't be afraid, just believe. Belief, faith, the exact same word, interchangeable. You saw what a woman's faith just did. Now I'm asking you. Oh, you came as a last resort. You came seeking me for help. Now I'm pushing that help to faith. So your daughter's dead. You can go back to your reality, because that is reality. Or you can put faith in me. He did not let anyone follow them except Peter, James, and John, the brother of James. And when they came to the house of the synagogue ruler, Jesus saw a commotion with people crying and wailing loudly. The memorial service, the funeral's already started. He went in and said to them, why all this commotion and wailing? The child is not dead, but asleep. And they all laughed at him. And after putting them out, he took the child's father and mother and the disciples who were with him and went in where the child was. He took her by the hand and said to her, Talitha koum, little girl, I say, get up. And immediately the girl stood up and walked around. She was 12 years old. And at this, they were completely astonished. And he gave strict orders not to let anyone know about this and told them to give her something to eat. In the Mishnah, the book for the Jews that discuss the laws of the Old Testament and how to apply, it is said even the poorest families on death of a family member should hire at least 2 instrumentalists and 1 mourner. If you've ever been involved in some Middle Eastern cultures, even today, a memorial service can be a pretty frenzied activity. No one warned me about the first one I went to. When the body is brought into the building, it seemed like all hell broke loose. Jackets are being taken off. People are hitting the casket. People are screaming, yelling. I was caught completely off guard. It's somewhat actually therapeutic versus our Western culture of just somber quietness. It's not just getting out the angst and the hurt and the pain, though. The louder and the more the chaos, the more you commemorate and honor the deceased. Outside the house, that has already begun. And Jesus sets up outside what he's about to do inside. Whoa, 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 quiet the racket. She didn't die. She's just sleeping. And now they laugh at him. He's being ambiguous. It's that euphemism, sleep, rest, death. Almost every culture has used them interchangeably. Oh, they're in eternal slumber. Oh, she's in a place of rest right now. Jesus sets it up. Kicks everyone out of the house. 3 disciples get to the furthest corner in the shadow. They try to blend in with the rock wall. They are now intruding at a place and time in a family where they have no business. Father walks in the door, and mom, for the first time, leaves the side of the bed. She stands and buries her face into his large chest. He grabs her by the back of the neck and the small of the waist, and for the first time, he sees his lifeless little girl. And it is beside this embrace that Jesus slips. His hand touches the cold fingers. Talitha koum. Breath comes back into her lungs and body. Eyes flutter and open. He helps her to the side of the bed and then to stand. And mom and dad are filled with mom and dad have we don't have an emotion for that, do we? Is it shock? Is it horror? Is it fear? Is it joy? Is it disbelief? And in the silence, he decides to speak. Don't let anyone outside know what just happened here. Oh, and fix her some macaroni and cheese. She hasn't eaten in days. After raising 2 girls, I know it's every 12-year-old's favorite. Don't let anyone outside know. The crowd is mocking you because you claim to be the Son of God. The religious leaders don't know what to do with a crazy man who claims to be God to forgive sins, and yet the miracles are undeniable. You want to prove that you are God, you pick the girl up and put her on her shoulders. You walk outside, and this is the big booyah mic drop moment you've been waiting for. You take her on the road with you. The next hillside where people go up.
Ladies and gentlemen, in just a few minutes, we're going to hear from Jesus Christ himself. But before that, I want you to hear the story of a dead girl from the dead girl.
That you had to add extra services for. But maybe he wants the same thing for her as he wants for the woman that stopped him on the road. Oh, physically, I have just given you life, but if word gets out, this is not a life to be lived. In a community of clean versus unclean, she's going to have to go back to 6th grade. She's missed a lot of work in the last 2 weeks. Who plays with the dead girl at recess? Her junior year, she will make excuses why she doesn't want to go, but the reality is the zombie will never get invited to a prom. Oh, she has life, but she is now untouchable. She will be 58 years old. buying groceries in the market, once again, dinner for one. When a young girl inadvertently gets close to her and she looks down, well, how are you? And the little girl will look up and say, hi, just to have the scene repeated that she's had to live through 100 times. A mom that grabs her by the collar and pulls her back and sternly tells her, that is the dead woman. Never talk to her again. And she will leave her basket and she will quietly walk out of the market, where only she has to see her tears. And she will wonder why they didn't let her die when she was 12. And maybe the Son of God is more worried about her prom night than his reputation. He will do well with his reputation. And he will sacrifice fame and glory to protect hers. Are you kidding me? You have shalom, emotionally, physically, one day sexually, relationally. Protect her, all of her. This is the Easter story. This is a God that says, I've come to earth to adopt and restore, to take guilt and shame. This is a story that sets up his. 10 chapters from now, there will be another crowd, and they will laugh at him, and he once again will pull off death and conquer it. And 2,000 years later, we still celebrate Easter. See in your note sheets, I know you've been tapping away going, he's never going to finish this. Mark is claiming that this man, Jesus, has the power over incurable diseases. Over incurable diseases. I'll give you the fourth one quickly. Mark claims this man has the power over death. In one boat story, from one shore to the next and back, he has the power over epic storms, legions of demons, everything natural, and all the hosts supernatural. He has power, what doctors have tried their entire life who could not fix, and now he has conquered death itself. Why? Mark is trying to give us an eyewitness account. What do you do with this man that has split time? What do you do with this Jesus? There is no mere man. This is not a myth. This is not simply legend or lies. He's got to be Lord. That is a decision you have to come to. But the story is not about a crowd that shows up at Easter. The story is about the two that step out of the crowd. And this is where our story intersects with their story. Number one, there's a huge difference between reaching out to Jesus and putting our faith in Jesus. There is a huge difference between showing up at church or calling out to God in a prayer for help. A huge difference between reaching out to Jesus and putting your faith in Jesus. Who touched me? It's ridiculous. How many people have reached out? Said, wait, everyone's touching you. No, someone just reached through the humanity of Jesus and touched the divinity of Jesus. Someone came with the faith knowing, if I give you and touch you, you in turn can heal me. Oh, everyone wanted to see Jesus. Everyone wanted to hang out with Jesus. Everyone wants a miracle worker in their back pocket and in their hometown. But one brought faith to Jesus, and that's where he stops the show for. It was the grasp of her faith that healed her, not the grasp of his cloak. Oh, daughter, you will not have my cloak anymore, but you can always have your faith. You see, number two, Jesus will either take our whole truth or none of our truth. He did not die on the cross just to be part of our life. Oh, I'm sorry if you grew up in a South Texas church like I did, where the Sunday school teacher would always end class and we'd be there in second grade in little bucket seats. Boys and girls, look, listen, look, listen, and we'd all look up. One day you're going to die, and when you die, you're going to go to hell and you're going to burn forever unless you want to say this prayer. Who wants to say this prayer? Hey, all right. I grew up in West Texas, man. I knew what heat was. I'm like, so is it hotter than August? Oh, yeah, I'm praying. I'm in. Now, boys and girls, if you just said this prayer and asked Jesus in your heart for the rest of your life, he's going to be part of your life. And whenever you need help, just call on him and he'll be there. What a pathetic excuse of Christianity. And I bought it. Oh, church, I promise you, in every one of these stories, there is a God that refuses to be part of your life. He goes, I will send my son to sacrifice, die on the cross. So whatever wrong, whatever guilt, whatever shame, whatever you've done can be forgiven. You don't have to pay that price one day. My son will pay it for you. But if that's what it's going to cost me, I will take all of you, or I will take none of you. This is way too big of a God and his sacrifice to be happy with part of your life. Physically, you're healed. I'm calling you out. I want the whole truth. Woman at the well, you want salvation? Let's talk about your sex life. Peter, you want to follow me? Let's talk about your night of your greatest mistake. I want all of it. I want every area of your life to understand I am Lord. I am Lord. That is not a title you need when you had in time of help. That is the description of someone that has sovereignty over all of your life, every aspect he owns. Oh, I'm far from perfect, but there is not a part of my life that his word does not touch, especially the pages that I think are asinine and archaic. Do you trust me to be bigger than you? Well, this doesn't make sense to me. Well, congratulations. Good luck on being your Lord. It's surrender, which brings us to number 3. Without surrender, there can be no salvation. Without surrender, there is no salvation. The crowd shows up in almost every story, but the story is never about the crowd. The story is about those in the crowd who fall down and surrender, who give up everything, the boats, the nets, the occupation, the tax office, Dr. Luke, the whole truth, and say, you will have all of me. I don't know why God wants all of me, but you can have all of me. That's surrender. I put in your notes Matthew 7, verses 13 on, right under finding our story and their story. You may want to read that. Jesus looks at the entire crowd and says, why do all of you think you're followers? He goes, let me tell you a story. There is a wide gate that everyone's on, and there is a very narrow road if you're going to be committed and be part of the kingdom. He said, many people on their last day are going to come up and say, Lord, Lord, didn't I sing to you? Didn't I pray to you? Didn't I cast out demons in your name? And he's going to say, I never knew you. Oh, you played church. You were part of the crowd, but I didn't have all of you, and I refused to have a part of you. He goes, here's the person that's in the kingdom. Those who do the will of my Father in heaven. Those that look at this book and say, I surrender to it. It doesn't make sense. But I trust you're a bigger God than I am, so I surrender to it. See, every one of us one day have a divine appointment with the Almighty God. What are you going to tell him when you breathe your last breath, when the heart stops? When he simply asks, did you know me? Oh, yeah, I was in the crowd. Remember I called out to you? I sang those songs. I give you a fist bump. The story is about those that said, remember I fell at your feet? Remember I surrendered? Remember I gave you the whole truth? And in return, you called me daughter, son. This is the Easter story. To gain a title that you cannot get on your own, that you can never live up to, that you will never earn. It is simply by faith and surrender. We've got a false sense of Christianity that says, oh, we're all children of God. We're not all children of God. If we're all children of God, why did the dude die on the cross? Dumb Jesus. He was duped for nothing. No, a child of God, who takes their life, their sin, their guilt, their shame, and says, I surrender. And in that moment, we're washed clean. In that moment, forgiveness happens. In that moment, that empty tomb not just backs up everything Jesus said and claimed, but now it's a risen life of God in us. God cannot be in a sinful body. He's got to clean that first. Oh, I'm far from perfect. But now I have the beauty of his death that forgives me in an empty tomb that makes life worth living. And I walk this earth with the creator of the universe. And when we're taught how to pray in Scripture, he says, call me Abba. The Hebrew word, Papa. And I will call you daughter, son, prince, or princess in the kingdom of God. Oh, what a story. What a story. See, the question we have to answer, are we simply part of the crowd, or are we one of the committed? That is the question of Easter. Congratulations, so far, you're part of the crowd. Only you know if you're part of the kingdom. And I know you're sitting there going, oh, Chris, I got this. I know Jesus is the Son of God. I know he came to earth. I know he died on the cross. And I know he rose again. Is that what makes you a Christian? Because according to the book of James, it says you qualify to be a demon at that point. That's not a great title, by the way. The Bible says the demons know Jesus is the Son of God, Jesus came to earth, Jesus died on the cross, and Jesus rose again. Please tell me you have something greater as an excuse than demon faith. You go, oh my gosh, but that's what I believe. What's the difference? Demons don't surrender their whole truth. I don't care what you believe. I don't care the boxes you can mark off. Is there a place where you go, I've surrendered to him? And there are places in my life that are jacked up and I do it my way. And I've got to make him Lord. There's the difference between knowledge of what happened and being a child of God. So here's what we're going to do on this Easter. We're going to change it from being a holiday where we all show up to church to an acceptance of what the stories are all about. I'm simply going to close in prayer. And you're sitting here asking yourself, have I made that decision? Am I simply part of the Easter crowd? Congratulations, you made the story. But the story is never about the crowd. Or do you know that you've surrendered? You've asked for the forgiveness that he gives on the cross. Oh, you haven't earned it. You don't deserve it. And you will never, never, never live up to it. It's a gift. He loved you enough to buy you back. But at that price, he will take all of you. He refuses to play a part of your existence. And in the midst of this prayer, if you want to say that prayer, I'm going to lead you through it. Right where you sit, you don't have to stand, you don't have to say it out loud, just between you and God. I'm going to lead you through that prayer of saying, today's the day I'm in. I want to be in the kingdom, the family of God. So, Father, thanks for Easter. Thanks for sending your son. Thanks for splitting time in our entire dating system as we know it. For your birth and your resurrection still being the primary holidays on our calendar today. May that force us to a place in our life to call you either liar or Lord. The greatest hoax ever played on humanity, that 2,000 years we are still buying this. Or the fact that 2,000 years proves you are who you claim to be. And there was an empty tomb that society couldn't cover up. God, for those of us sitting here right now that need to make that decision, may we say this prayer. And if that's you today, just say this right between you and God. Just say these words. Say, God, thanks for bringing me here today. You know I needed to hear this. I've been doing life my way. And today I want to say I'm sorry. I want to make you Lord of my life. I want to give you everything. I know Jesus died on the cross. And today I realize that was the pay for whatever debt I owe you. So today I ask you to forgive me at that cost. From this day on, you have all of me. Teach me how much you love me so I can learn to love you. Teach me how to take every aspect of my life and surrender to you to get what I can never get on my own. Your life in me. Teach me what it's like to live daily with the living creator of the universe within me, never leaving me alone. Thank you for Easter. If you just said that prayer, we're about to finish this whole prayer. Everyone's going to take out a little communication card in their bulletin and write down prayer requests or questions. Can you take that out and just write, I said that prayer? We would love to be praying with you this week as you start that journey. Father, for the rest of us, may Easter never be a holiday. May it never be a day. May it be a title of son or daughter, prince or princess that we get to live out daily with you. May you give us your spirit and your strength to help in the areas of our weakness, to correct us when we try to be God of our life instead of letting you. May we walk knowing the joy of being loved and accepted physically, emotionally, relationally, sexually, Father God, spiritually. May we have shalom because our life is no longer our life, but yours. In Jesus' name, amen.
Well, as always, we'd love to connect with you online. If you have a question, comment, even a prayer request, we'd love to hear from you. You can send that to northcoastchurch.com. We'd also like to thank you for your continued generous support. If you'd like to give, you can donate online at northcoastchurch.com or through our North Coast app. We hope you were challenged and encouraged by today's message, and we'll see you next week.